Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever found yourself wrestling with, how to keep young learners truly captivated, especially when you're trying to teach those subjects that, well, let's be honest, can feel a bit dry or abstract to a developing mind? Maybe you're an elementary education major, just starting your journey into the exciting, sometimes overwhelming world of game-based learning, and you're really curious about its actual power beyond just being fun. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating world of game-based learning, or GBL, specifically for the elementary classroom. We're going to look at what makes it tick, how it genuinely impacts learning, and, crucially, how we can design and use it to work smarter, not just harder, for young students. We're sifting through some powerful, rigorous research to kind of extract the most important nuggets about how games can foster deep thinking and genuine knowledge acquisition, not just fleeting entertainment.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here is how much more there is to game-based learning than simply boosting engagement.
Yeah.
It's more than the immediate hook. We're going to explore how well-designed games can actually build vital lifelong skills like self-regulation and reflection. And these are foundational competencies for any learner, obviously, but they're especially formative and critical for elementary students as they develop their whole approach to learning.
So let's start with the big picture then. Why game-based learning? I mean, what problem is it really trying to solve in education?
Well, yeah, one core challenge that research, including a notable study by Azevedo back in 2014, consistently highlights, is that students often struggle to stay engaged and intrinsically motivated with challenging topics. Think about those foundational subjects in elementary school, maybe the more abstract concepts in math or early scientific principles like, I don't know, how plants grow.
Yeah, they aren't always as immediately exciting as, say, story time, right?
Exactly. And the goal isn't just about making learning fun in that superficial sugar rush sort of way.
Right. It's about making it sticky, making the knowledge truly adhere, making it something students want to delve into and remember long after the lesson is over.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture for elementary students, this disengagement can really begin to take root quite early. I mean, if a child in first or second grade starts to perceive math as just a series of tedious drills.
Or science as just memorizing facts.
Exactly, from a textbook.
Yeah.
That perception can have significant long-term impacts on their academic trajectory and their self-efficacy as a learner. Games, as researchers like Plass, Homer, and Kinzer underscored in 2015, offer a uniquely powerful way to inject enjoyment and intrinsic motivation into these subjects.
They sort of transform the chore into a challenge.
Precisely, making those initial experiences much more positive and genuinely conducive to deeper learning.
And that leads us directly to what I guess we consider the dual goal of effective game-based learning, because it's absolutely critical that games generate enjoyment and high motivation, sparking genuine interest, showing the task's value, tapping into that intrinsic drive.
Sure, the engagement piece.
But it's equally, if not more, important that students actually acquire the specific knowledge, skills the game is designed to teach.
Yeah, as educational psychologists Mayer and Johnson pointed out back in 2010, and Plass and his colleagues reiterated in 2015, a game might be incredibly entertaining, with all the bells and whistles. But if the learning objective isn't met, if the student hasn't actually learned the content, then it hasn't truly served its educational purpose.
It becomes just a really fun distraction, basically.
Right. And this raises a really important question for educators and game designers alike. How do we ensure that all those aesthetically pleasing elements like a realistic virtual microscope in a science game, or beautifully animated storybooks in a reading game, or even those highly interactive human-like non-player characters, the NPCs.
The computer characters.
Yeah, the computer-controlled characters. How do we ensure they don't just encourage exploration and make the game look good?
Yeah.
How do we make sure they actively foster genuine knowledge acquisition?
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, the research we've been looking at points very clearly to two crucial components that bridge that gap between pure entertainment and effective learning: self-regulation and self-reflection. It's about designing games that don't just give students information, but actively encourage them to think about their thinking.
To become metacognitively aware as they play.
Exactly.
That sounds incredibly promising on paper, but, we have to ask, does it actually work? What's the real evidence for its effectiveness, particularly when we're talking about our youngest learners, elementary kids?
Yeah, good question. The good news is that researchers have designed many different game-based learning environments, or GBLEs, across various academic domains, topics, and age groups, including, crucially for you, elementary students.
Okay.
Now, while some of the very earliest meta-analyses had somewhat mixed findings, suggesting GBL wasn't always the silver bullet some hoped, more comprehensive and recent studies, like a major one by Mayer in 2014, paint a much more optimistic picture, showing significant effectiveness. For instance, this meta-analysis found that GPLEs were consistently more effective than other forms of computer-based learning environments.
Okay. More effective than just using a computer for drills or something.
Right. Now, when we talk about effect size, think of it as a way to measure how much better one teaching method is compared to another. An effect size of D equals 0.12 might seem small on the surface, but it represents a consistent, measurable improvement over just standard computer learning.
Okay, small edge.
But here's where it gets really compelling. GBLEs were found to be significantly more effective than traditional paper-based instruction. We're talking a robust effect size of D equals 0.53.
Wow. Okay, that's substantial.
It is. And they were even more effective than traditional purely classroom-based instruction with an effect size of D 0.63.
So better than worksheets and better than just standard lessons.
In these studies, yes. To put that into perspective, an effect size of 0.4 is often considered a pretty strong impact in educational research. So for a method to show gains of 0.53 and 0.63 over long-standing traditional approaches, that's a clear indication that we're talking about tangible, meaningful improvements in learning outcomes.
Yeah, improving understanding by like half a standard deviation just by using a well-designed game. That sounds powerful.
Is a powerful tool in any teacher's arsenal, potentially.
That's a pretty strong endorsement overall, but I know our elementary education listeners are probably thinking, okay, but what about my specific subject? Does this apply to math or reading or science?
Absolutely, and this is a crucial nuance for any elementary educator. Mayer's 2014 research wasn't just a blanket statement. It also revealed that effectiveness varied quite a bit by content domain.
Okay.
GBLEs were found to be very effective for science, demonstrating a robust effect size of D equals 0.69. So if you're teaching biology concepts or physics concepts to young minds, games look like a fantastic avenue.
Good news for science teachers.
Definitely. And they were remarkably effective for second language learning, with an even higher effect size of D equals 0.96.
Wow, nearly a full standard deviation.
Which suggests games are uniquely suited to language acquisition, probably because they're so immersive and interactive, right?
Makes sense. But what about the core subjects like math and reading?
Right. However, and this is a vital point for you, our listener, considering GBL for your elementary classroom, there were no significant effects observed for math or language arts in this particular meta-analysis.
Oh, okay, that's important. No effect at all.
No statistically significant positive effect compared to the control groups in that specific review. Now, this doesn't mean games can't be used for these subjects or that they are useless.
Okay.
What it strongly suggests is that the design principles and the way learning is integrated might need to be fundamentally different for math or language arts to yield the same cognitive gains as they seem to for science or language.
So maybe the types of games were the issue, like too much drill and practice for math without deep concepts?
That's one possibility. Or maybe the narrative elements sometimes present in language arts games distracted from direct phonetic or grammatical instruction. It really highlights that game-based learning isn't a one-size-fits-all solution.
Context matters, subject matters, design really matters.
Critically, the design of the game truly matters. Furthermore, this research revealed that GBLEs show a differential influence on learning outcomes across age groups too.
Ah, okay. How so?
Well, while elementary students still saw positive effects, with an effect size of D equals 0.34.
Still positive, which is good.
Yes, definitely still positive. But secondary students experienced notably greater gains at D equals 0.58, and college students even more so at D 0.74.
Interesting. So it gets more effective as students get older?
According to this data, yes. So GBL does work for elementary students, but perhaps with a slightly different magnitude of impact compared to older learners. This isn't a reason to shy away from it, though.
No, but maybe manage expectations.
Exactly. It's more a call to be mindful of its specific strengths and how it integrates into the broader elementary curriculum. It's effective, but we need to design strategically, knowing that the developmental stage of younger learners might require more explicit scaffolding or different types of game mechanics to maximize impact.
So we know GBL can be effective, but that leads to the next big question for any teacher thinking about using it. How do we actually design effective GBL? What components really work? And perhaps more surprisingly, What might actually hinder learning, even if it seems like a good idea?
Yeah, Clark and colleagues in 2016 conducted a meta-analysis specifically on GBL components that foster or hinder learning, and their findings are truly eye-opening, especially for elementary contexts.
Okay, let's hear it. What works?
All right, here's where it gets really interesting for practical application, particularly for an elementary classroom. On the positive side, and this should resonate with every elementary teacher listening, the inclusion of scaffolding and feedback within GBLEs significantly facilitated increased learning outcomes.
Okay, that makes total sense. Guiding the student, giving hints.
Exactly. It's a foundational principle for effective elementary instruction anyway, right? Think about how you guide a young student through a new math concept, providing hints, breaking down complex word problems.
Then immediately letting them know if they're on the right track.
Precisely. Games can embed this seamlessly through hints from NPCs, pop-up explanations, visual cues. For example, a game might show a character struggling to jump a gap, and a helpful little fairy character might pop up saying, perhaps you need to build momentum first.
That's scaffolding in action.
Got it. That integrated support seems key for younger kids.
Incredibly powerful for young learners who are still developing their independent problem-solving skills.
Okay, so scaffolding and feedback are good. What about the surprising part? What doesn't work so well?
Right. Now, for what might surprisingly not work as well, and this is a major takeaway for design, the inclusion of detailed narratives or rich visual components within a GBLE may deleteriously impact students' learning. Wait, really? Like, cool graphics and stories could actually hurt learning?
Potentially, yes. That's
Yeah.
a fancy way of saying they could actually harm learning outcomes. Why? The research, echoing findings from Mayer and Johnson back in 2010, suggests these can actually distract students with what are called seductive details.
Seductive details.
Yeah, think dazzling graphics, elaborate backstories, captivating cutscenes that are entertaining but ultimately irrelevant to the core learning objective. They can provide goals other than learning the content.
Like just wanting to see the next cool animation.
Exactly, drawing students' attention away from the cognitive demands of the educational material. For elementary students who are naturally more easily distractible and still developing their executive functions, this is a huge takeaway.
So keep it simpler.
Simplicity and a sharp focus on the learning objectives seem key. It means a visually stunning game with an elaborate storyline might capture attention. But if that attention isn't directed towards the actual math problem or science concept, it's counterproductive. A simpler, clearer game focused on a specific learning task might be far more effective for a first grader than an immersive epic with a sprawling plot.
That's a critical insight. So it's not always about adding more bells and whistles. Sometimes less is genuinely more when it comes to effective learning design. What about how long students play, or if they play with others? Do those factors make a difference?
Good questions. The meta-analysis by Clark and colleagues also looked at duration and grouping. They found that learning outcomes are greatest when students interact with the GBLE over multiple sessions.
So not just a one-off activity.
Exactly. A single one-off session, surprisingly, didn't outperform traditional methods. This is an important distinction for elementary teachers who might be tempted to use a game as a quick, isolated activity. It suggests that sustained engagement and repeated exposure, allowing for deeper processing, practice, and skill development, are necessary for GBL's benefits to truly manifest.
It needs integration over time.
Right. It's not just a one-time treat. It needs to be integrated over time to build cumulative knowledge.
And what about playing alone versus in groups?
And here's another surprising finding that often challenges common assumptions about collaborative learning in games. They found that students interacting alone did better than those in groups for direct knowledge acquisition.
Really? I would have thought collaboration would be better.
It's counterintuitive for many. Now, this doesn't mean collaboration is bad or that students should never play games together. What it might suggest is that for certain types of game-based learning, particularly those focused on individual content mastery, the individual focus.
Fewer distractions, maybe.
Possibly. The ability to self-regulate without the distractions or complex social dynamics of a group could be more beneficial. For elementary classrooms, this means carefully considering when a game should be a solo adventure versus a group activity, based explicitly on the learning objective.
So tailor the approach. Solo for mastery, maybe group for other skills?
Perhaps. Individual mastery of a new concept might be best built in solo play, while collaborative problem-solving skills might be better suited for other types of intentionally designed group game activities.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the learner themselves? If games are supposed to lead to deeper learning, how are students interacting with them internally? That feels like a perfect segue into self-regulation, which sounds like a massive piece of this puzzle.
It really is.
So to put it simply, self-regulation is about students actively and accurately monitoring and controlling their own actions, behaviors, thoughts during learning, like developing an internal GPS for learning.
That's a great analogy. An internal GPS, that inner voice that says, am I understanding this? Do I need to try a different approach? Where should I go next to find the answer?
Got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
According to prominent theories of self-regulation by researchers like Pentrich in 2000 and Zimmerman and Chunk in 2001, effective self-regulation involves dynamic processes like planning how you're going to approach a task,
Okay, planning.
continuously monitoring your progress as you go,
Monitoring.
and strategically adapting your methods when you encounter a roadblock or a challenge.
Adapting.
Yeah.
Planning, monitoring, adapting.
Right. And what's important to understand is that these aren't necessarily sequential steps that happen neatly one after another. They can actually happen simultaneously. You could be planning your next move while also monitoring if your current strategy is working, all while, managing your frustration.
Wow. Okay, it's complex.
It is. And the research, specifically from Azevedo and colleagues in 2019, points to 4 key types of self-regulatory processes that are constantly at play: cognitive, affective, metacognitive, and motivational, or what they call the CMM processes.
CAM, cognitive, affective, metacognitive, motivational.
Exactly. Each letter stands for a critical component. C for cognitive strategies, like summarizing or elaborating. A for affective processes, managing emotions like frustration or curiosity. The first M for metacognitive processes, monitoring comprehension or planning. And the final M for motivational processes, maintaining effort or setting goals. These are all intertwined and crucial for how a student navigates any learning environment, including a game.
Okay, to really make this concrete for you, our listener, let's unpack a well-known example from the research. The game Crystal Island. In this immersive 3D game, students have to solve a mystery illness on a fictional island. As we walk through it, maybe you can imagine applying this concept or a simplified version to a game in your own elementary classroom. The goal is to see exactly how these self-regulatory processes play out in a game context.
Sounds good. So, in Crystal Island, the student's journey begins when they meet an NPC, Kim, the camp nurse, who gives them the initial task: figure out what mysterious illness has spread across the island. From this initial task, the student immediately has to engage in planning.
Okay, step 1, planning.
They're thinking, okay, a mystery illness. How will I gather clues? Which location should I visit first? Maybe the patient tents or the research lab? In what order should I do things? And crucially, they also activate prior knowledge, asking themselves, what do I already know about microbiology, viruses, or different kinds of illnesses? This foundational planning sets the stage.
Okay, so how would that look in an elementary classroom game?
Let's create a parallel. Imagine you're using a game called The Great Classroom Cleanup Mystery. The teacher, acting as an NPC, says with mock distress, oh no, someone spilled glitter on the carpet just before our parent-teacher conference. How can we find out who did it and clean it up before Mrs. Smith arrives?
Okay, I can picture that.
For the planning stage, your students might decide. First, we'll check the art area. That's where glitter often gets used. Then we'll look for specific glitter colors. Was it red, blue, or purple? They'd also activate prior knowledge. What do we already know about cleaning up messes? What kinds of tools might we need for glitter specifically, not just dirt? This is that initial strategic thinking, just like in Crystal Island.
That makes so much sense. It's all about that initial strategic thought process. And once they have a plan, they need to gather information, right?
Exactly. In Crystal Island, the next critical step is knowledge acquisition and information gathering. Students interact with sick patients to figure out symptoms, what food they ate, looking for clues. They talk to expert NPCs on viruses and bacteria to learn about how these pathogens behave. They might read virtual books, papers, posters within the game, even complete concept matrices.
Mini assessments to organize info.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Helping them organize their understanding of the scientific texts. They are actively seeking and absorbing information from multiple sources.
And in the glitter cleanup mystery.
This translates directly. For information gathering, students would interview other students, acting as NPCs, asking what they were doing, where they were. They might read signs around the classroom, virtual posters on cleaning safety, or look up cleaning tips in a virtual classroom care guide, their digital book of knowledge.
Okay.
For concept matrices, you could have a simple drag-and-drop activity where they match different types of messes, glitter, paint, Play-Doh, to the correct cleaning tools: Rome, sponge, vacuum. This active seeking and processing of information, like a detective, is core.
So once they've gathered all this info, they need to organize it somehow. How do they keep track of it all and make sense of the clues?
That's where monitoring comes in. In Crystal Island, students get a diagnosis worksheet within the game. It's not just static. It's a dynamic tool they use to track symptoms, record test findings, assess the likelihood of illnesses based on the info they've gathered. It helps them organize thoughts, track progress, visualize the puzzle.
It's like a digital notebook for the case.
Pretty much. For our elementary game, they might use a glitter clue tracker, maybe a digital checklist or a simple graphic organizer. On this tracker, they can mark off where they found glitter, what color, which students or NPCs were in that area. It's a way for them to visually monitor clues, see puzzle pieces coming together, and assess if they have enough info to form hypothesis.
That concrete monitoring tool helps develop that metacognitive awareness.
Exactly. Knowing what they know and what they still need to find out.
And from that monitoring, they start putting the pieces together to form a hypothesis, their educated guess.
Precisely. Based on all the acquired and monitored information, students in Crystal Island must make hypotheses and inferences about the possible cause of the illness and which specific food items might be transmitting it. They're drawing logical conclusions from the evidence, essentially formulating a testable idea.
And in our elementary scenario,
This might sound like a student saying, okay, based on the purple glitter found in the art area and the fact that student X was making a purple art project, I think student X was the one who spilled the glitter. They're drawing a logical conclusion from their data.
okay, hypothesis formed, and now they need to test it, right? Which sounds like it involves some higher order thinking.
Yes, the testing and metacognitive evaluation phase. In Crystal Island, students go to a virtual lab and use a scanner to test food items. This isn't just random clicking. They have to actively choose the relevant pathogenic substance, like a specific virus or bacterium, from a list that also includes irrelevant options like carcinogens or mutagens.
So they have to know what they're looking for.
Right. It requires a strong metacognitive judgment. Is this choice truly relevant to the problem I'm solving? Furthermore, they also have to specify why they are testing a particular food item, another explicit metacognitive step. And a positive result must be for a pathogenic substance to be useful, meaning they have to correctly evaluate the significance of their findings.
How would that work for the glitter mystery?
For our glitter cleanup mystery, imagine this. Let's use our glitter vacuum, our scanner, on student X's art project. The child then has to select what they're looking for. They need to pick purple glitter, not dust bunnies, from a menu, demonstrating that metacognitive evaluation of relevance. If the vacuum beeps confirming purple glitter, they know they found key evidence, and they have to explain why that finding matters.
It makes them think about why they're doing something, not just what.
Exactly. And evaluate the effectiveness of their actions. That's crucial.
And finally, they pull it all together for the grand finale, their ultimate solution.
That's the final diagnosis and reflection. Students complete their diagnosis worksheet, which hopefully they've been using to monitor progress. They fill out a final diagnosis, illness, source, treatment plan. Crucially, if their diagnosis is incorrect, Kim, the nurse, provides feedback.
So they don't just fail and stop.
No, they must revisit their hypotheses, read more material, test more items until they get it right. This encourages a vital reflective loop where they learn from mistakes and refine their problem solving.
And the glitter version.
In our elementary classroom parallel, students submit their glitter cleanup plan, outlining who they think did it and how they'd clean it up. If it doesn't work, maybe more glitter appears, or their theory doesn't hold up, they go back to the drawing board, look for more clues, adjust their plan. This continuous feedback loop, requiring reassessment, revision, persistence.
That's how real learning happens.
Even in a game about glitter, it makes the self-regulation process explicit, actionable, and iterative for young learners, teaching them that learning is a cycle of exploration, action, and adjustment.
It's clear that self-regulation is incredibly important in these game environments. But what does the broader research say about SRL and its actual impact on overall learning performance in GBL? Does it really make a difference?
Yes, studies consistently show that the ability to self-regulate does indeed improve overall learning in GBL. It reinforces what we've been discussing, with support from various researchers, including Clark et al. In 2016 and Mayer in his 2014 and 2019 analyses. It's not just a nice-to-have, it's a significant driver of effectiveness.
So when students can plan, monitor, adapt, they learn more.
Basically, yes. However, some specific findings add important nuance. For example, Key's 2008 study found that while games certainly led to higher motivation in math among middle school students,
Which we'd expect.
right, they did not lead to significantly higher cognitive mass performance or metacognitive awareness compared to conventional methods.
Ah, there's that math finding again.
Exactly. It reinforces that earlier point about math learning in GBL, while engagement might be up. The direct cognitive gains might not be as clear-cut without very specific design considerations for math content. Maybe focusing less on narrative and more on structured problem-solving or deep conceptual understanding.
Something vital for elementary teachers choosing math games. Making it fun isn't enough.
The learning needs to be deeply embedded. In another insightful study, Sabourin et al. In 2013 looked at middle school students playing Crystal Island and found that students with high and medium self-regulation levels had significantly higher learning gains than those in low self-regulation groups.
Okay, that makes sense. Better self-regulators learn more.
Yes, but what's particularly illuminating is how.
Yeah.
The high SRL students weren't just guessing more. They actually read more of the available information and tested fewer items in the lab.
Fewer, so they were more efficient.
Remarkable efficiency in their learning process. They weren't just randomly clicking. They were strategically engaging, knowing what information was important and when they had enough to proceed.
That's fascinating. And other studies support this link between SRL and performance.
Yeah, Neatfeld et al. In 2014 showed that the use of self-regulatory strategies was positively associated with performance in Crystal Island. Specifically, students who used more effective cognitive strategies like organizing information or relating it to prior knowledge, and who had lower metacognitive monitoring bias.
Meaning they were better at knowing what they actually understood.
Exactly. Better at accurately judging their own understanding. Those students achieved higher game scores. Furthermore, from a motivational standpoint, higher situational interest and a stronger sense of self-efficacy also predicted better performance.
So it all connects: cognition, metacognition, motivation.
It suggests that fostering these self-regulatory skills within the game context is crucial for effective learning, especially for elementary students who are still developing the capacity to navigate complex tasks independently. It's about building those internal skills as much as teaching content.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting and maybe challenges some of our core assumptions about learning. We often intuitively think that positive emotions are the only good ones for learning. You know, as educators, we try to make classrooms happy, exciting places.
Right. The focus is usually on positive effect.
But research on GBL seems to be revealing a more nuanced and frankly kind of surprising picture about the complex role of emotions.
Indeed. Sabourin and Lester in 2014 found, as you might expect, that positive affective states like being focused, engaged, curious, were positively correlated with learning gains, interest, effort, and perceived value in Crystal Island.
Makes sense.
And conversely, negative states like confusion and frustration were, again, as you might intuitively expect, negatively correlated with these positive outcomes. This makes perfect sense on the surface. Who wants to learn when they're just confused or frustrated without resolution?
Right. That aligns perfectly with what we'd assume from classroom experience, but then other studies seem to complicate this narrative, suggesting it's not quite so black and white.
Exactly. Andres and colleagues in 2015, for example, found that experimenting activities within a physics game were correlated with confusion, but that confusion actually led to less understanding.
Okay, so confusion was bad there.
And unresolved behaviors, where students didn't fully complete correct activities, correlated with boredom. So sometimes negative emotions really do seem to derail learning, which just adds to the puzzle. When is confusion helpful? When is it harmful?
It's tricky.
This is where the plot thickens with a truly fascinating finding from Bradbury et al. In 2017, also investigating Crystal Island. They looked at agency, which in a game context is basically how much control a student has over their path and choices.
Okay.
They explored different levels of agency and found that students in the partial agency condition, meaning they had a limited guided navigation path where they were required to interact with all relevant objects like reading all books or talking to all NPCs, actually had the highest learning gains.
Interesting. So not total freedom, but some structure was best.
Exactly. This structure seemed quite beneficial, providing enough freedom but also enough guidance to ensure they encountered the key learning material.
And here's the kicker, right? The truly counterintuitive part.
Get this. In this partial agency condition, the one with the highest learning gains, there were significant positive correlations between proportional learning gain and negative emotions like anger, fear, confusion, and frustration.
Wait, positive correlations. meaning more anger or confusion related to more learning.
Yes. In fact, anger was even a significant predictor of learning gain in that condition.
Wow. That goes against almost everything we're traditionally taught about creating positive, stress-free learning environments. How can anger or confusion lead to more learning?
It's a profound implication, especially for elementary classrooms, and it challenges the common idea that we should always shield students from any negative emotions during learning. If a game is designed with a structured but challenging path, like that partial agency condition where students are nudged towards necessary interactions, a little confusion or frustration might actually push students.
Push them to think deeper, persevere.
Exactly. Push them to think deeper, to persevere through obstacles, and ultimately achieve higher learning gains. For elementary teachers, this means rethinking productive struggle in a game context.
So it might not be a bug to be fixed immediately.
It might be a feature to be intentionally designed for and managed. Imagine a game where a child is trying to figure out a complex puzzle. They might feel a little confused or even frustrated, but if the game provides just enough scaffolding to prevent complete despair,
That mild frustration could motivate them.
it could motivate them to try harder, to revisit clues, or to think about the problem in a new way. This is how resilience and true problem-solving skills are built, not just through constant easy wins, but through navigating and overcoming manageable challenges. It fosters grit.
Okay, that's a huge mindset shift potentially. So we've covered motivation, engagement, self-regulation, even the surprising role of emotions. Now, let's move to self-reflection, which you called the capstone of game-based learning, the process that consolidates it all. What exactly is self-reflection in this context?
Fundamentally, reflection is a metacognitive process. It's higher-order thinking about your own thinking. It's about taking a deliberate step back and linking your metacognitive awareness, your understanding of yourself as a learner, your strategies, strengths, weaknesses, with the regulation of those processes.
Taking control, activating knowledge, seeking help.
Right. Researchers like Eifenthaler in 2012 and Pintridge in 2000 both speak to this critical connection. It's not just about doing tasks in the game. It's about pausing and thinking about how you did them and why you did them.
And this isn't just passive, right? It's an active process.
Not at all. It's an active, intentional, and crucial process for integrating new concepts and strengthening existing knowledge structures, as Vrugte and colleagues noted in 2015. However, a common challenge with games, especially fast-paced ones,
You get caught up in the action.
exactly. They often lack the built-in pause or explicit prompts for critical reflection, as Hartfeld and colleagues observed back in 2007. The very nature of many games keeps students in a state of flow and action, which can inadvertently bypass opportunities for deeper contemplation.
That makes perfect sense. It's hard to stop and think deeply when you're escaping a dragon. And many students, especially younger ones still developing these skills, often struggle with reflecting meaningfully on their own.
Right, highlighting the strong need for scaffolding. Studies by Lin et al. In 1999 and Kim et al. In 2009 showed that without that gentle nudge or structured opportunity, students might just move on without fully processing what they've learned.
So we need to build it in.
Precisely. That's why researchers have focused on developing embedded reflection prompts directly within GBLEs, and the results are quite promising. It's about making those reflective moments a natural part of the game experience.
Okay, so if we're going to prompt reflection within a game, when's the best time? Before, during, after?
The research suggests prompts can be given prior to the game, perhaps to help set goals or activate prior knowledge. They can also be time-based, popping up, say, every 15 minutes, or activity-based, appearing after each major step, solved puzzle, or completed mission.
And does it matter which timing strategy we use?
Studies show that both time-based prompting, like Eifenthaler in 2012 and Bannert and Ryman in 2012 found, and activity-based prompting from Bannert in 2006 can significantly increase learning outcomes. So both seem viable.
Okay, so for your elementary classroom application, maybe after students finish a level in a Math Monster game, a prompt pops up. What strategy helped you solve the trickiest problem on this level?
Perfect example. Or, if they're playing an adventure game and just help their avatar cross a virtual river using a new tool, a prompt could appear. You just helped your avatar cross the river using the buoyant bridge. What did you learn about buoyancy that helped you make that bridge work?
Making it concrete and context-specific.
Exactly. Making students pause and think about how they learned, not just what.
And how students are prompted and how they respond also varies, right? Which is crucial for elementary learners.
Absolutely. Prompts can be menu-based, written on screen, spoken by an NPC, delivered via video, or even on paper worksheets alongside the game, as Fiorella and Mayer explored. Students can then respond by speaking, typing, or using simple drop-down menus or drag-and-drop options,
Lots of flexibility there.
which is key for accessibility. Continuing our elementary classroom application, imagine a simple reflection journal integrated right within the game. After a session, students could type their thoughts, or for younger learners, dictate them using voice-to-text.
Or even use emojis.
Yeah, maybe choose from a few emojis to describe how they felt about a challenge, and then select a short sentence about why they felt that way from a list. The key is making the reflection process accessible, manageable, and developmentally appropriate.
Okay, this brings us to a fascinating debate in the research, especially for how we phrase prompts. Generic versus direct prompts. Davis in 2003 contrasted generic prompts, very open-ended, like, right now we're thinking, with direct prompts, much more specific, like, to do a good job on this project, we need to. What did they find?
Surprisingly, in Davis's study with 8th graders, generic prompts actually led to better learning outcomes.
Generic was better. Why?
The explanation was that these generic, open-ended prompts allowed students more control over their reflection, empowering them to focus on what was most meaningful and personal to their learning process. It encouraged a deeper, more self-directed metacognition.
Giving them more ownership. Seems like it. Eventhaler in 2012 found similar results, where generic prompting led to significantly higher learning gains. This is counterintuitive for many educators who might assume more direction is always better, especially for younger learners.
Right, you'd think kids need more specific guidance.
But for your elementary learners, this suggests that giving them a little more freedom in their reflection can be incredibly powerful. Instead of a highly specific prompt like, did you remember to use the measuring tool in step 3, you might ask something more open-ended like, what did you notice about how you solved that puzzle? Or what was the most interesting thing you learned?
Encouraging deeper, more personal metacognition.
Exactly. Empowering them to identify their own key takeaways and strategies rather than just confirming they followed instructions.
That's a truly great insight for elementary teachers. But I recall there was a specific nuance to this finding, something about task difficulty we should also keep in mind. You're absolutely right to pick up on that important nuance. While generic prompts often show promise, Lee et al., in 2009 found that specific prompts were better, but only for difficult tasks.
Okay. Only when it's really tough.
Right. When the task was relatively simple, there was no significant difference between prompt types. This means tailoring the prompt to the task difficulty is also important. For elementary students tackling a particularly complex, multi-step problem in a game, maybe a challenging math problem or a difficult science investigation, a more direct guiding prompt might initially be more beneficial.
But for simpler tasks, go generic.
Seems like it. More open-ended questions can foster deeper personal insight on easier tasks. The research suggests flexibility in your prompting strategy is key. It's not one size fits all.
Okay, so beyond just teaching students content, it sounds like GBLEs also hold immense potential as powerful research tools themselves, helping us understand the very process of learning.
Absolutely. Game-based learning environments aren't just for delivering instruction. They're vital tools for understanding complex, abstract constructs like self-regulation, reflection, motivation, even self-explanation. Because games inherently capture so much data about student interactions, every click, decision, path taken.
You get a really detailed picture.
An incredibly granular window. It allows researchers to empirically test intricate theories of learning and even adapt the systems in real time based on student behavior. Like, how do we really know if students are genuinely monitoring and regulating their learning in dynamic game scenarios? GBLEs provide unprecedented insight.
That's a fascinating thought. Games that could not just teach you, but literally understand how you're learning, not just what you're doing or if you got the right answer.
Yeah.
Like, the game becomes a real-time diagnostic tool.
And that leads directly to the exciting future of harnessing multimodal data. Future research aims to use multimodal, multi-channel data, things like eye tracking, to see where a student is looking, facial expressions to infer emotions.
Like confusion or delight.
Exactly. Gestures, even physiological sensors like skin conductance, which can indicate arousal or stress, to identify subtle behavioral signatures of motivation, self-efficacy, engagement.
Wow.
This means GBLEs could become incredibly smart, truly adapting in real time to a learner's specific cognitive, affective, metacognitive, and motivational needs. Imagine a system that can tell if a student is genuinely curious or just randomly clicking, or if they're hitting a wall of frustration before they even consciously realize it.
So, for your elementary classroom vision, maybe a game detects a child's confusion through their eye movements or posture.
Right. And instead of just letting them struggle silently, the game could then offer a timely, tailored hint from an NPC, perhaps a gentle, "Are you stuck on this part?" or even subtly guide them to a reflection prompt, specifically designed to address their specific struggle.
That level of personalized, empathetic learning sounds transformative.
Offering support exactly when and how it's needed most.
So, the ultimate goal isn't just subject knowledge, but training skills for life, skills that transcend any single curriculum. That's what we always aim for as educators, isn't it?
Precisely. GBLEs can be intentionally designed to deliver explicit training for motivation and emotion regulation strategies, directly teaching students how to manage frustration, how to persist through challenges, how to regain focus.
Teaching resilience directly.
Exactly. This can be directly combined with cognitive and metacognitive skill training, creating a holistic learning experience. Imagine a game where you don't just level up for content mastery, but you earn a resilience badge for successfully navigating a moment of intense frustration and choosing to persist.
Building lifelong learners equipped with emotional and mental fortitude.
That's the goal.
And what about how students interact with the games themselves? Could they become even more conversational and intuitive?
That's where advanced interaction, specifically natural language processing, comes in. Imagine if learners could communicate directly with NPCs in the game using their own spoken words, like talking to a teacher.
Wow, just talk to the game.
Yeah. This direct conversation could reveal their intricate thought processes, their misconceptions, their emotional states to the system in real time. Think about a child asking a virtual character, "Why am I stuck on this math problem?" And the NPC providing an answer that adapts not just to the puzzle, but based on the child's identified cognitive struggle, affective state, or motivational level.
Moving way beyond multiple choice.
Far beyond simple choice selection to truly understanding and responding to the learner's internal world.
And finally, what about the most immersive futures? Where is this all heading on the cutting edge?
Well, current GBLEs are already seamlessly integrating with virtual and augmented reality to create even richer, more immersive educational experiences. These technologies hold incredible promise for sustaining motivation and positive emotions by making learning incredibly engaging and relevant.
Like stepping inside the lesson.
Exactly. They allow learners to practice and transfer complex cognitive and metacognitive skills across diverse domains, from virtual science labs to historical simulations. And all the while, these immersive environments can naturally prompt and capture data about self-regulation and reflection, making the learning deeply embedded, personally meaningful, and incredibly effective without feeling like a chore.
The future classroom as a gamified, adaptive, immersive world sounds pretty amazing.
The potential is truly exciting.
So we've unpacked the incredible potential of game-based learning today. It's clearly so much more than just a fun activity. It's a powerful, research-backed tool for developing crucial, lifelong skills like self-regulation and reflection, especially for our youngest learners.
Yeah, and we've seen how strategic design is key, incorporating effective scaffolding, maybe choosing simpler visuals over distracting narratives sometimes.
And even embracing some forms of productive negative emotions, which is still blowing my mind a little.
It can lead to much deeper understanding and more robust skill development when handled correctly.
This deep dive truly highlights that successful GBL isn't about just throwing a game at a problem and hoping for the best. It's about thoughtful, intentional design that intricately integrates cognitive, affective, metacognitive, and motivational processes.
Absolutely. The future of personalized, adaptive learning through games is truly exciting, offering a pathway to meet each learner's unique needs in ways we could only dream of before.
So, as someone passionate about elementary education, maybe this deep dive makes you wonder. Could intentionally designed productive struggle within a game where children have to grapple with a challenge actually be more valuable in the long run than simply providing constant easy wins for building resilience and genuine problem-solving skills in young learners?
That's a great question to ponder.
And how might you, in your future elementary classroom, encourage a moment of reflection when a game gets tough, prompting deeper learning, rather than just letting students click next level without processing their struggles or successes? We hope this deep dive has given you a shortcut to being incredibly well-informed about game-based learning and sparked even more curiosity. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing.